if you look at all the warning signs, it is all there for anyone to see plain as day. There is infinite money now. Someone from the Federal Reserve said that in a clip before.
Your ATM is safe, your banks are safe, there's enough cash in the financial system, and there is an infinite amount of cash at the Federal Reserve, an infinite amount of cash at the Federal Reserve,
an infinite amount of cash at the Federal Reserve.
Don't you want somebody to love? Don't you need somebody to love? Wouldn't you love somebody to love? You better find somebody to love. Don't you want somebody to love? Don't you?
But, there's infinite money in the Federal Reserve. But it's true now, and you're seeing signs of that. If you look at the Bitcoin treasury companies like Strategy, they're borrowing at 0%. Right? They're effectively tapping into the infinite money out there and converting it to Bitcoin. Even at a lower level, like you might not be Michael Saylor, but you can also tap into infinite money too. You can tap into yield generating stocks, like ones that are anchored to MicroStrategy, right? If you can borrow it 5% or 7% and get back 120, 140%, that's infinite money right there, right? Even if you're discounting for capital gains tax, that's still infinite money. And the question is, when do people figure this out? And I think when people figure out this, that you could basically, invest, I don't know, $40,000 and start making back your annual salary free. I think a lot of money is going to flow to Bitcoin. Some of it will flow to other things like high time preference activities, but a lot of it will flow to Bitcoin once people figure out that there is infinite money out there and anybody can tap into it.
Yeah, and that would be through a product like MSTY.
Yeah, or IMST, right? And I think people don't really understand that. Like people are comparing those things to buying Bitcoin or buying MSTR and comparing the performance. But the way I view it is you should borrow and then pay the 5-7% or whatever percent you can borrow at and buy that, right? Like if you borrowed money to buy Bitcoin or you borrowed money to buy Strategy, maybe you'll do well, but there's a chance that it'll stay flat too, right? There is a chance. But if at least with the dividend stocks, you can just that you're going to get some dividend. And the interesting thing too is that you don't even need to sit in a dividend stock. You don't need to sit in either of those two, like IMST or MSTY. You can just buy it before the ex-dividend date and then get rid of it when it comes back, because it usually does come back after the dividends are paid out. Because dividend stocks, they still dip after the dividend is paid because you're assuming that there's erosion. But I don't know. A lot of people don't understand it. Like these yield options are not paying you out of company earnings. They're actually harvesting the volatility by selling options. So they're also tied to the underlying in some way. Like they've synthetically constructed MSTR. So when MSTR goes up because Bitcoin goes up, it'll come back. So if you bought something at, I don't know, if it's IMST, it's like what, 50 something bucks? Like if MSTR rips and IMST dipped after a dividend payout, it will come back up and you can exit it. And if your timing is right, you can actually grab all of these dividends every month. So you don't need to just take one. You can take the IMST comes out first. You can take the IMST dividend. If you can exit at a loss less than your gain, you can then put your funds into MSTY and get that dividend too. But there are other dividend stocks too. You can basically harvest all these dividends. So there's a lot of free money out there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never heard somebody break it down like that. Like I've implemented creative, very low risk forms of leverage in my life, like paying my auto loan the minimum payment as opposed to paying my vehicles off quicker, right? It's non-collateralized and I could stack sats. But, I'm a rather conservative individual who's very risk adverse, which I find myself saying at times to people, it's ironic for somebody who produced cannabis for 17 years and has a 100% allocation to Bitcoin. So I get concerned sometimes about the leverage and some of these treasury companies that are coming online. Like, I'm just a dude, a retired farmer. I'm not a TradFi specialist. So, when it comes to all these companies, I feel like it almost parallels the leverage traders that would blow up during downturns. Is there any parallel between are these new treasury companies like the leverage traders that could blow up just at another scale? Is that something that we should be concerned about? I mean, some of them have to blow up, I would assume.
It's hard to say. I mean, with the ETFs, I would say massive volatility is sort of gone from Bitcoin. Like, I don't think you'll see huge 80% drawdowns in the future because eh, those are a symptom of a market that can move quickly, like trading on spot exchanges. But for a lot of these new entrants in there, they might be funds that bought IBIT or FBTC or BitB, but they're not going to dump quickly on some news. And a lot of people are putting it in their 401ks or their retirement accounts. They're not watching the market and saying, okay, we got to sell now. So I think you're going to see a lot more muted volatility. And that is good for leverage Bitcoin plays like a lot of treasury companies. But I still think there is some risk there because even without an 80% drawdown, you don't know if some of the smaller ones with CEOs that are not Bitcoiners, if they will weather, a prolonged dip. And even if it's like a 20-30% drawdown, can they handle that? Are they strong enough to deal with the pressure from shareholders or the board if the board is not fully aligned? And would they sell? And would that push us down further? And I think it's a possibility. But at the same time, you have a very strong cohort of Bitcoin treasury companies with strong CEOs that have conviction, like Michael Saylor and like Adam Back. And Metaplanet seems quite strong too. So I think even if some of the smaller ones capitulated, the larger ones would simply just take all their Bitcoin, right? So it's a question mark if something happens. But I do think there is paper Bitcoin in the market right now. And it is probably some less reputable exchange that is doing something like FTX, because we know FTX sold Bitcoin that they didn't have. So I don't put it past some smaller exchange selling Bitcoin that they don't have. And that's probably one source of paper Bitcoin.
But you don't think that that's going to be any of the large ETFs or Coinbase? Because sometimes I get concerns about where we're at. It seems like you're going to be done manufacturing that Omega candle. I think about you all the time. I talk to some of my buddies. I'm like, when's Samson going to be done building this Omega, the God candle, and it's like, so I feel like the price is a lot lower than it should be. But then at the same time, I feel like there's the largest incentive there's ever been from the proverbial overlords, if you will, to suppress the price. If we had Brian Armstrong if he's the fall guy and goes down like Sam Bankman-Fried did, that could kick this can down the road a decade or more. That would cause huge problems. So I can't really make sense of whether or not I feel like there's major suppression or there's going to be some orchestrated event, or if we're just going to continue to tick up like we should. Is that crazy to be thinking? I get concerned. Do we have a big FTX times 10 moment?
Yeah, everyone's wondering like who could be the source of the paper Bitcoin. I don't think it's Coinbase. I mean, I dislike Brian as much as the next guy, but I don't think he wants to go to jail, so I don't think it's gonna be him. But you can't rule out anything. This is why it's important to hold your own Bitcoin, have your own keys, be sovereign. And in the light of all these potential blowups, that's your safety, right? Using Bitcoin as it was built originally and not keeping it with someone else. If you want to invest in an ETF, if you want to invest in a treasury company, do so. But just know that you're taking on some risk. The zero risk thing is self-custody. And, to each their own. Whatever you're comfortable with allocating, then do it. But just know that the safety is Bitcoin in your own hardware wallet.
Yeah, that's where you should put all of the money that you don't want to lose, as they say.